Bill Mathe is a PE teacher by training and a leader by choice. Having come into teaching later in life, he has taken the opportunity to work across 4 countries on 3 continents in a teaching career that has been challenging, rewarding, and never dull. Phil is a passionate advocate for holistic education and a follower of the servant leadership approach to management. Phil has strong views on PE and its role in education and the pedagogy of learning in today's educational world. Welcome to the show, Phil, and tell us a bit about that life before teaching.
Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. So I always wanted to be a teacher. I had an amazing PE experience at school. It was a fantastic PE teacher. I'm going to name drop her, actually. She'll never listen to this, but I'm going to name drop her anyway. So I had a PE teacher called Jan Eaton, who was just phenomenal. It didn't matter that I was male and she was female. She was inspirational. And so from a very young age, probably 13, 14, all I really wanted to do was be a PE teacher, like Jan. And went to uni to study it. Then life got in the way. Met my wife and kids, had kids, and decided that perhaps I would explore other avenues. So I had a 10-year career in high-level sales. Worked my way up from telephone sales through to selling big computers. I sold e-learning, and eventually ended up selling paper. So I'm one of those bad guys that impacted on the rainforest, unfortunately, for a while. I spent 4 years selling paper, which I've never thought I'd end up selling something like paper to people that shouldn't really have been using paper. Then it became a very obvious, like, normal story, I guess. I was sitting on the train on the way into London for about the 4th time that week, looking around me, looking at people buried in, it was just about had mobile phones at that point, or books or paperwork. Just thought, this is not what I want to do. Like, this is not how I envisage my life going. I don't want to spend most of my life sitting in meeting rooms or on the train. So I went home, said to my wife, don't want to do this anymore. And being the supportive person she is, she didn't immediately turn around and say, yeah, but what about the money? She said, okay, well, explore it, look into it. So I went away, looked into how possible it would be to initially go back to uni, and then realised, with kids to support, that wasn't really an option. And then discovered GTPs, found a local school that was willing to sponsor me through a GTP, and never looked back. Taught in the UK for 8 years in a pretty tough all-boys comp. Gave me a really good grounding of what it actually meant to be a teacher. I think if I'd gone into a nice, quiet countryside school, I probably would be a different teacher to the one that I am today. I think that gave me a really good vision of what the reality of teaching was quite early on. And never really thought it would change. I thought I would be at that school for 20 years and make progress up the ladder. And then a school from Kenya approached me and said, we want to come on a rugby tour. And we understand that you play rugby. We're going to be in your area. Do you want a game? So we sorted out a game, and I sorted out logistics for them with buses and things. And at the end of the second, we played them twice. At the end of the second fixture, the guy turned around to me and said, I'm leaving Kenya next year. I'm going somewhere else. Do you fancy taking over from me? And from that conversation, it took 3 months, and I was on a plane to Kenya. And I've never looked back. It was utterly bonkers. I remember sitting in Costa Coffee on the high street in the town that I lived in on my birthday, having to explain to my 3 children, who were 14, 11 and 6, that we were not just, they were not just leaving the schools that they went to. We were not just leaving our home, but we were moving 3,500, 4,000 miles away to a different continent completely, that they'd never even really, bless them, they'd probably never even heard of Kenya, let alone ever thought about moving there. So that was a really interesting experience, and actually seeing their response to that kind of affirmed that we were doing something really special. Yeah, so a couple of months later, standing outside of Nairobi airport, expecting to get picked up middle of the night. Nobody came to pick us up. Just looking around us saying, like, what is this? What is going on? Then the bus turned up eventually about an hour later to pick us up. Then it got impounded by a policeman because it had parked on double yellow lines. So the school then frantically tried to organise us taxis. And we got to the school, got to our apartment about 6 hours later. And yeah, flopped into bed. And the last thing I remember, Emma turning around to me and saying, "We better not have made a mistake here. Like, you better not have made a mistake." But I tell you what, it was the best thing we ever did. It was the best thing we ever did, and we've never looked back. We did 2 years in Kenya. Amazing time. I miss Kenya every day. I would go back to Kenya in a heartbeat. Then we moved on to Cairo, which is a whole different level of crazy. But amazing place to be a teacher, especially a PE teacher. Sport in Cairo is great. And then was given the opportunity to move to the UAE, which seems like the most civilized place in the world compared to Nairobi and Cairo. So yeah, that's me. Like a lot of people that go into teaching late, I wake up every day and think, yeah, this was the right thing to do. It's never easy. I'd never say that being a teacher is easier than being a salesperson, but it was what I was meant to do, for better or worse. I wouldn't say, no, I'm not some Uber teacher that thinks they're amazing at this, but it was what I was meant to do. And I spoke to Jan actually last month. She contacted me completely out of the blue via LinkedIn, and she said, "I've been following you for a while, and I'm really proud of what you did." And that was really quite, that sort of affirmed everything, that through it all, I ended up where we expected that I would end up.
Wow. Love hearing the stories of international teachers. They always bring a lump to the throat about their journey and the seminal moments. There's a few exit points there, Phil. I'd like to touch upon the salesman. And we had a podcast recently with a diplomat, Richard Oppenheim, who is the deputy ambassador in Saudi Arabia. And he talked about everybody's always selling something. No matter what job you're in, you're always selling something. Tell us about those transferable skills from sales then that you could bring across to teaching.
It's definitely the case that the experience that I had in a sales environment or a sales marketing business environment meant that when I transitioned into being a teacher, I had a set of skills that no one else around me had. And you're right, teaching, we sell every day. We sell our subjects, we sell the idea of learning, we sell motivation, we sell to our clients, which are our pupils. I hate, one of my big bugbears is calling our parents our clients. They're not our clients, our pupils are our clients. And yeah, negotiation, presentation skills, being able to talk, being able to keep a conversation on track, being able to drive a situation towards a conclusion that you've predetermined. Being able to listen, I think, is a really, I mean, we all say that being able to listen as a leader is a really crucial thing and an important skill. And nowhere is that more true than when you're in a sales meeting and you're trying to establish exactly what it is that this client is looking for, and how what you've got to offer fits with what they need, and how can you position your product in a way that is going to link closely enough with their requirements in order for them to sign on that bit of paper. So yeah, completely transferable skills. I think I think there's a huge value to being a career teacher. I know a lot of people that went into teaching straight out of uni. Most of them are much further up the chain than I am because they were doing it for an extra 10, 12 years. But I tell you what, people that I meet that have had other careers before they became teachers have a different set of skills and a different outlook. And I think, especially in places like the UK where they struggle with teacher retention, teachers that have done something first, whether it's a 2-year career or a bit of volunteering or a 10-year sales career tend to appear to last longer. And I think that's because you can always look back and say, yeah, this was a tough day, but it wasn't as tough as that day where I had to drive to Manchester for 2 meetings and I didn't get home until 12 o'clock at night. And then I had to write up the report ready for my manager the next day. So yeah, I think it was a really valuable thing. It definitely made me the teacher and the leader that I am today. I think a lot of my leadership skills have come from that experience, as opposed to my experiences in the last 12 years of teaching.
It's an interesting one, fella, and what I can gather from that is that you almost appreciate it more when you've been doing something else. You realise how good teaching is or can be. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's completely. You get a different worldview when you're just a teacher and you've come out of school, you've gone to uni, you've done your teacher training, done fantastically well, gone into school, whatever school that might be. Absolutely that there are some amazing teachers that have gone through that route, but you haven't got that concept of the alternative. And I certainly, I know I can only really speak for myself, but I do, whenever I have a difficult day in the office, whenever I have a difficult day with meetings with senior leadership or with my teaching team, I always have that to look back on and go, well, I chose to do this. This was a grown-up adult decision that I made to sacrifice all of those things, more money, steady career, building a career. I chose to do this, and so I should always be grateful that I've got the opportunity to do it.
There's sort of a suggestion, if I'm listening to you right, Phil, from what you're saying, of that teachers maybe sometimes fall into a bit of a hamster wheel of going through academia and then qualifying as a teacher and going straight into teaching and not experiencing life outside of what would be primary school, secondary school, tertiary college, university, back into school and back following a timetable. I've joked several times with colleagues that I've every year of my life I've had a school timetable. Having that time out, what did that teach you? You mentioned listening. What other things? Tell me a bit more about the transferable skills that you still find maybe you allude to or you consider when you're in meetings or you're in teaching situations now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an incredible thing that people do when you come out of school, go to uni and become a teacher, and you do that for a career. Like I said, I know some exceptional teachers who have never not had a school timetable. And actually, in a funny kind of way, I look at those people with a little bit of envy, because I'd be interested to know where I would be had I become a teacher at 22, 23. But yeah, those skills that I gained from working in IT, working in sales environments, definitely when I retrained to be a teacher, I used those skills to formulate a plan for how I was going to go about doing this new career. So yeah, I said listening, being able to get your point across in a non-confrontational way, I think is really important. And that's something that we don't necessarily teach teachers. So, meetings that drift and drag and go around in circles or become fraught don't happen in sales environments, because you always have a passive and a sort of more proactive person in those meetings. You have somebody that's either trying to sell something and somebody that's listening to that sales pitch, or you have somebody that's trying to say, this is what I need. And then the salesperson takes on the passive role of saying, okay, I can do that for you. And then you negotiate to a point where both sides of the table are getting what they believe is the right outcome for them. And that's not something that I think we do very explicitly in teaching. And by our very nature, we're very opinionated, aren't we, teachers? We all have an opinion on everything. And being able to balance that opinion with the understanding that others have other opinions, and we need to collaborate to find an approach to whatever it might be, whether it's a huge project or whether it's a tiny day-to-day logistical thing. We need to move forward, and the most important thing is that we move forward with the majority of people on board with what we decide. That ability to work in a kind of a democratic way with passive and proactive individuals, I think is a really important skill. And yeah, just simple things like being able to talk in public. The amount of times that I've been asked to lead assemblies because I can speak in public, the amount of people that turn around and said, oh, you know, would you speak to these parents because you're really good at talking to people? That doesn't mean that career teachers can't do that, but I definitely learned those skills in a different environment. Now, I presented at sales conferences in front of thousands of people, and I've gone through that horrendous set. I remember I had a conference in Dublin. I'd never been to Dublin, and so I took the opportunity the night before the conference to enjoy some of Dublin's recreational activities, and then the next morning had to present to 1,500 people in a sales conference about paper, which is if you're trying to inspire people to listen to you for 45 minutes, talk about paper is not the way to do it. And I remember the nerves. I remember being absolutely petrified. But knowing that it didn't matter that I was petrified. I was still going to have to go and do that. And you know, it may have gone well, it may not have done, and other people would be able to judge that. But remembering those things when I have to stand up and do a whole college assembly now, or you know, present to parents about ski trips and things, and remembering those experiences. If I'm looking at 100 parents or 1,000 pupils, you know, I've got that to fall back on, and I think that's you can get those skills from being a teacher. Don't get me wrong, you can absolutely get those experiences, but the fact that I had them prior to becoming a teacher, I think made that transition just that little bit easier for me.
And I imagine it's a bit easier to sell a ski trip than it is some paper, to be quite frank, right?
Well, you wouldn't believe. Trying to persuade people that your bit of paper is better than the next guy's bit of paper is, you know, that thing about selling ice to Eskimos.
Brilliant. Keynes, I've always said that you could do that, couldn't you? You'd have made a great salesman, I think, Keynes.
Do you reckon? Maybe I missed a calling. I think I've been finding it quite hard to sell paper, to be honest. That's a stretch, isn't it?
Well, it is definitely the case that teachers are salespeople, whether you know it or not. And again, perhaps this is something that we as a community don't put enough emphasis on, is that we every time you stand in front of pupils, parents, colleagues, your educational boards, any of those things that you do, especially when you get to leadership type levels, you're selling something. Whether you realize it or not, you're selling your school, you're selling your curriculum, you're selling your extracurricular activities, you're selling your trips, you're selling your way of doing things, and that ability to sell something is ingrained in us, whether we realize it or not.
And it comes back to that front line being the clients, as you use that term, as the students in your school. They're essentially the judges of what they're doing and how they're taking that on. Phil, I want to just drop back into that. You made a comment about being non-confrontational, about passive versus sort of proactive meetings and the different individuals within those. I know you're a big advocate and a self-proclaimed advocate, or self-confessed advocate of servant leadership. How does that model fit in with being non-confrontational in meetings, you know, maybe having some of those difficult conversations and trying to sell something as a group, as a unit, or even, you know, as an individual trying to sell that to your team or to a group of parents or students? Where does that non-confrontational sort of approach fit in with servant leadership?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't realize that. I know that servant leadership is one of those kind of tag phrases, and we talked a little bit about this previously. And I didn't realize that I was a servant leader. I didn't set out to say, right, this is what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a servant leader. I only realized when I got to Kenya. And the school that I worked in Kenya was a round square school, so it had a philosophy built on the core principles of servant leadership and Kurt Hahn. I'm a big follower of the principles of Kurt Hahn. Actually, I've done a lot of research into it, and a lot of the principles that founded schools like Gordonstoun, I find really resonate with me. But I didn't realise that I'd never really heard the term servant leadership until I got there and heard them talking about developing servant leaders of the future. And when you're in a country like Kenya, and you're lucky enough to work with slightly more affluent, fortunate children in a country like Kenya, you do realise that they feel a huge responsibility to become positive leaders for their country and their continent. Because it's those kind of people that are going to drive Africa into the next generation and turn Africa into the powerhouse of the world that it inevitably will become. And the more I listen to them talk to these pupils about servant leadership, the more I realize that lots of the traits that I have kind of fit in with that approach to leadership. So I fundamentally believe that my job as a leader is to remove barriers to excellence in other people. I think that's the thing. If you were going to ask me what would be the statement that I would put on the wall in front of my desk that I would think about every day, it would be that my job is to remove the barriers that other people have that stop them being excellent. And I try, when I'm thinking about how I'm going to lead my team or how I'm going to lead this project, I try to think about that. Is my job is to be not necessarily front of house, but to be in the background, making sure that those really outstanding individuals get the opportunity to do the things that I know they're capable of. And again, that if you come back to the sales environment and the sort of the sales and marketing career, if you're working in a team of salespeople and you have a team target to hit, which I always did. So I would always have an individual financial target to hit, but then as a team of salespeople within a region, we would have to hit a target in order to satisfy the people above us. And you need to make sure that as well as you meeting the goals that you have or you've been set, that all of the people around you are able to meet theirs as well. And so I would regularly find myself working in teams with people that wouldn't necessarily benefit my targets directly, but would ensure that their targets were achievable, because the bigger picture is that we all have to be successful. And I think that idea of working towards a common goal, not always putting your objectives at the forefront of those activities, but ensuring that the people around you have a decent chance of being successful, leads to a more successful environment as a whole. And so that really fits with this idea of servant leadership, of working for the benefit of others, even if it's at the detriment to yourself. And it resonated with me, and I saw it working. I saw the way these pupils, so in some cases, tiny children, tiny junior school children were being taught about the importance of putting the needs of their community before their own needs. And then you would see it in action. So you would see children going back to really rural villages in Kenya, having got a scholarship to work or to come and learn at the school, going back with these ideas of having to make a difference, wanting to make a difference, and trying to inspire the people within their communities back in the Masai Mara or Amboseli or wherever it might be. And you could see, and there were lots of examples of pupils that were coming out of our school and actually going on and taking on roles within society that fundamentally used all of that sort of servant leadership approach in the things that they did. Now, whether they're lawyers that advocate for community land preservation, a huge amount of people come out of those kind of schools in Kenya and go into wildlife protection now, at the expense of potentially much more financially successful careers. But they have this deep burning sense of need to give back to their communities and to serve the communities that have got them to where they are. And I think actually that's a really good point. And coming back to the idea of coming into teaching late and always feeling grateful for having the opportunity to do it. And I think I have a little bit of a subconscious burning desire to always give back to the profession that gave me the opportunity to really be who I was supposed to be.
It's powerful, Phil. And I'd like to just look at it from another lens. Can everybody be a servant leader, or is it very much dependent on the values of the person?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? I think we all have it in us, but I think a lot of it it's context. So it depends on where you are. It depends on where you come from. Servant leadership is just a phrase. It's just coin a term. And a lot of us, you do these kind of things, and there are lots of different types of leaders at lots of different times during the course of our day or our week within our roles. So I think pinning yourself to just one mast, pinning your flag on one particular thing is kind of disingenuous, and actually I'm not always I don't always approach everything in a sort of a servant leadership model, because sometimes you need to have a different approach to it. But we do, by our very nature as human beings, we have empathy, we have the ability to be inspired by the successes of other people. And as PE teachers, we're all PE teachers, we know the sense of achievement we feel when our pupils achieve something in our curriculum area, whether that's within a lesson or probably more obviously within some kind of extracurricular sporting environment. We get a huge sense of achievement when our pupils go and perform well at an athletics competition or a football tournament. And that sense of wanting them to feel that success has no benefit to us, really. Yeah, you might go back and your head teacher might say, congratulations, well done, you won this trophy, I'm really pleased for you. You might be unfortunate enough to work in a school where there's an expectation of that kind of level of success. But you, go on, sorry.
No, I think it was my square, it's my chair squeak.
Yeah, I think we all have it in us. I think that we all, when at the right time, display servant leadership qualities. I think some people potentially veer towards it more. I think it lends itself to a sort of a passive sort of nature. And I like to think, and this is definitely something that's evolved over time, and something that I probably wouldn't have said I am 10 years ago or 12 years ago when I first went into teaching, but I'm quite a calm individual. I think the people around me, the people in my department would say that I am a calm and composed individual. I don't seek out opportunities to be front and center. He says, quite ironically, doing this today with you guys. But I think I get immense satisfaction from the achievement of others and knowing that I was a small part of that. And I think that lends itself to that sort of servant leadership mindset.
So there's some key words there, Phil. I've picked up and I've just made a note of them. Empathy, calm, composed. Are those your core values then that drive you, and that's about you being authentic? And would others describe you as that then?
Well, I'd hope so. I'd hope they describe me as it. You would have to ask the people that I work with. I display those on a regular basis. But yeah, I mean, empathy is a really important thing. And I think, again, it's something that most teachers have without actually having to explicitly think about it. We are empathetic people, because we have to be, because our clients, our pupils need that in the people that support them through what is a huge part of their lives. I remember being at school and having a maths teacher, and she probably isn't around anymore, bless her, so I can probably say this without worrying about upsetting her. But empathy was not part of her genetic makeup whatsoever. And I remember being petrified of maths. Maths was not my strongest suit at the best of time. It still isn't now. Luckily, my wife's subject area is maths. So whenever I need to do anything with spreadsheets, then I refer back to her. But I remember being absolutely petrified of making mistakes in maths, and knowing that I was going to make mistakes. I think that was the thing. Is like, as children, you're not perfect. Like, you're not stupid. The children are not stupid, and they know they're going to make mistakes. And there really is no worse environment to be in as anybody, adult or child, than knowing that you're going to make a mistake and knowing that you're not going to get any empathy from the people that are supposed to support you. And working in a really tough all-boys comprehensive school in a pretty rough part of southeast England made me realise that these kids, these boys, these supposedly macho, quite often the only male in the household individuals, needed support, needed empathy, needed to be understood, needed to be listened to, needed somebody to put their arm around them and say, you will be all right, and it doesn't matter. This test result doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And we were as a school really good at that, really good at that. And I think probably coming from a very hard-nosed sales environment, I needed that experience to really realize how important empathy was. So empathy, definitely. Consistency. I think if you're asking me what are my absolute core principles, I think consistency is really important. You can be consistently average, but as long as you're consistent, everybody around you knows that's what's coming. I think if you jump around from emotion to emotion, if you jump around from idea to idea, if you are hugely democratic one day and then totally authoritative the next, that's very hard to work with. And I've worked with people like that, both within education and outside of education. I've worked with people that, you could possibly say emotionally unstable. I don't necessarily think it's that. I just think it's a personality that doesn't necessarily have consistency, and that's very hard to how is this person going to react to this today? Is it going to be totally different to what it was yesterday? If I can be consistent, then my department can learn to expect a certain response, and so they can plan for that and they can anticipate that, and I think that makes a much better working environment. So I would say consistency is another one, and then also reflective. And again, this is something I think that I've developed as I've got older. And I do. I'm 42 now. I see myself as quite an old head, especially within PE. Now, when I went into PE teaching, I said to Emma, the one thing that I cannot do, I cannot be a 65-year-old PE teacher that can't run around anymore. And I'm starting to feel like I'm getting that way. I have no massive desire to get out of PE anytime soon. So I think I'm going to end up as that 65-year-old PE teacher. But where was I going with that? That ability to just be really consistent, I think, is the most important thing to me at the moment. Just allow people to know who you are. Allow people to know what buttons they can push, what buttons they really don't want to push, so that they can plan around that.
And Phil, you've taken this model of servant leadership into the worldwide PE community really now, haven't you? You've been doing some work on what PE teachers would like to have in their PE lessons and what they see as their non-negotiables within the subject area. Do you want to share some of the findings that you've had from that? I understand it was over 700 PE teachers worldwide that responded.
Yeah, so to give you some background, we took the opportunity, like lots of PE departments have, to pause during COVID-19 and lockdowns and distance learning, to really pause and reflect on what we did well, whether our curriculum, our PE curriculum, our extracurricular provision had evolved since the school had opened 8 years ago, whether it was still meeting the needs of our pupil cohort. You know, as with most schools, as with your schools, guys, we're quite a transient community. People come and go, pupils come and go, different types of pupils come. Now, a new hospital will open in Al Ain, and all of a sudden we'll get a completely different group of pupils from a different part of the world coming to join us. And a curriculum needs to evolve, and arguably our curriculum was very good. Certainly, we get very few complaints about the PE and sports provision within our school, but we just reflected that possibly this was an opportunity to look at it again. And we really have a desire to build a more holistic programme. Our programme was quite traditional, British independent school, and we think that, the people around me in my department, who are all exceptional PE teachers, we sort of came to the conclusion that we wanted a more holistic approach for the next few years in our programme. And we started off trying to do a bit of research. So we did a huge amount of reading. I'm still doing a huge amount of reading on it now, but then we decided to look at what our non-negotiables would be. What are the things that fundamentally drive what we believe PE should be? And we talked about it. We had some interesting discussions, never getting heated, but often quite vibrant discussions about what we really believe PE in 2021 should look like. And then I decided to sort of widen that out and canvass opinion from outside of our school. And I never really considered that it was going to become quite as big as it did. I just posted a link to a Google form on Twitter, and it sort of got shared about amongst the PE community. And yeah, by the end of the 6 weeks that I left it open for, 701 PE teachers replied to it, which was extraordinary. And I was very humbled by that people actually bothered to give up a couple of minutes of their time. Some of the comments, we gave an opportunity for comments. Some of the comments were brilliant about how difficult it was to reflect on what are the things that really drive people as PE teachers. So it was really interesting. And the results, I'd like to say the results were unexpected, but actually, you know what? The more I look at them, the more I think you would expect these results from modern holistic PE teachers today. So out of the 701 responses, so the question was, out of this big long list, pick the 5 key non-negotiables that you believe every PE program should have in it. 500 out of the 700 said happiness and enjoyment was the most important thing for a PE program, which I just think is the most lovely result. I just think if you were going to sit down with a blank sheet of paper and decide what every pupil in your school is going to come away from PE with, most of us would put happiness, enjoyment, fun at the top of that list. And so to have so many PE teachers affirming that, I think was just, even if that would be the only result from this, I'd have gone away happy. I think it was great. Fundamental movement that's a really interesting one. So 430, nearly 440 people said some form of fundamental movement skills provision, which I think is really positive. And I think moving forward in PE as a subject area, I think more and more I'm seeing it. I'm fairly sure that you will have had, in fact, I know you did last week, have a podcast which probably talked about fundamental movement skills. It's such a key part of what I think we believe PE should be in this day and age. So you would expect that to be quite high. Social development, collaborative skills was really high. Self-confidence, so building self-confidence in our pupils, which again, in a very challenging world, these pupils of ours are going to grow up in a world with some really difficult challenges ahead of them, partly due to all of us, partly due to technology, partly due to the nature of things like social media, and being confident in yourself as a human being is a really important thing. And PE is so well placed to provide that opportunity. There are other subjects that can do that as well, but PE if it's delivered in a really positive way, can build a child's self-confidence like nothing else. And so I think the fact that, let's go on, Alan, sorry.
I just initially, there's nothing there about winning. There's nothing there about being an elite athlete. It's all about values and development.
Yeah, so let's go to so if you go to the other end of the list. So sports science theory came at the very bottom, which for me is actually a little bit disappointing, because my passion is for academic theory PE. I love it. I absolutely love teaching. If you gave me a year 7 class or a year 11 or a year 13 class, I would pick the year 13 class every day. I love that link between school and university. And I love the kind of discussion you can have in a theory PE lesson. It really drives me. It's a passion of mine. So the fact that that was the lowest possible one, perhaps I think it's really interesting. Perhaps would I put it on as one of my 5? Maybe not, but I think it is still really important. But then you get to competitive sport, physical, significant amounts of sport, sports rules, all these kind of things that are to do with actually being good at a game, being better than the next person at whatever sport it is that you're providing. And I think that's very telling. And actually, what was quite interesting is the most vehement comments that I got. So when people wrote a comment, the most passionate ones were for people that had put one of those things and really, really believed that competitive sport still has a fundamental place in PE, which is in a way is if you have that sort of level of conviction, then that's absolutely fine. And we all know that there's still a huge success story around school sport, and school sport still has a really important place in the UK, in schools in the UK, whether that's comps or academies or independent schools. It's still fundamentally important to what schools offer, but whether it has a place in PE or not is a different conversation. And I think what a lot of the PE teachers that reply to this have done is they've looked specifically at PE and they've tried not to look at sport. And that's, for me, really interesting, because that's what we've done with our curriculum. We've stripped out sport and we've made sure that what we're delivering is physical education, physical literacy, and a holistic education program. And then we've separated sport and we offer sport in a different way. And that's allowed us to offer a whole range of other opportunities for success to pupils who traditionally didn't necessarily feel they were achieving in a much more traditional sporting curriculum.
Really interested in the alignment between the research data that you've collected in terms of people's opinions of what are non-negotiable in comparison to what the current practice in the schools that they're working in is. Do you feel there's a disconnect at the moment between where people see PE and where people see the future of PE compared to what's actually happening in real life? Because what you've just alluded to there, just to add a bit of context to that question, was that people want fundamental movement, collaborative work, overcoming challenges, happiness and enjoyment. And actually the sport-related stuff and the theory-related stuff is quite low. If you go into a random collection of schools around the world to look at PE, and we're talking in British curriculum schools, my inkling, my thought would be you would still see a hell of a lot of sport-related programs or sport-related content in lessons. You would see a hell of a lot of theory work, whether it be BTEC Nationals or GCSE work or A-level or IB sports science. Do you feel that we're not aligning those yet? And do you think there's work to do there?
Yeah, you're going to get me stirred up here now. So one of the things, so it was when Alan introduced me, he said that I have quite strong opinions on PE, and I do, and they're evolving all the time. Yeah, one of the things that really has really become apparent through this process, and also through my engagement with PE teachers on platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook. And one of our biggest problems as a global subject area is nobody can decide what our subject is. nobody can tell you what PE is globally. Like maths is maths. You might teach maths in a different way, but fundamentally, maths is maths. Physics is physics. It's linked to those laws that govern everything around us. And so, regardless of how you approach it, and of course, different teachers, different teaching styles. Some people would say learning styles, which just makes my skin crawl. But you never want teachers to lose that ability to be creative, to be unique, to design programs that meet the needs of their specific pupils. But unless we as a community can decide together collaboratively what is PE in 2021 or in the 21st century, then we're just all offering our own version of it. And I see this, we're in a very lucky position in international schools because we have a transient community. We see pupils coming into our schools from other parts of the world all the time. And likewise, we send pupils to other parts of the world all the time. And it's so obvious that pupils that come into my school have had PE in a completely different way. And their perception of what PE is fundamentally different to what ours is. And then they'll move on to another school and they'll have to make that transition again. And whilst you can deliver PE in different ways, if we can't agree what PE is, then we are always going to be treated as a subject that doesn't take itself seriously. And we've all experienced that. We've all experienced the comments, the discussion about, well, isn't PE just going and kicking a football round on a field? And in some schools, yes, it is. But in the vast majority of schools nowadays, where they have PE teachers like the likes of us, like the 3,500 PE teachers that I've got on my Twitter account, we're far, far more scientists, educationists, reflective practitioners than we're given credit for. And I think if we could come to a convergence in terms of what are the really important things that we should be imparting on pupils globally in our subject area, then I think we would make far more progress on our place within a educational program.
So maths is maths, physics is physics, biology is biology, physical education traditionally is sport.
Traditionally,
physical education is physical activity.
Physical education is about physical literacy, isn't it? Or it's about understanding what your body can do in different situations and how you can use your body in a variety of different contexts. And when I say body, that's head, hands, heart, isn't it? That's all of your body, including your brain. So when we talk about things like leadership, when we talk about things like social development, collaborative skills, these are things we still do with our bodies. We just happen to use one particular part of it. And there's no better place for you to problem solve, to practice problem solving, to practice leadership than in a physical environment. And we have such a fantastic opportunity within PE to really deliver those holistic, fundamental human skills that these children are going to need to solve, like I said, really big problems that they're going to inherit when they get to adulthood. Now, Lewis, I know where you're going with your completely, and I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree, and it would be hypocritical of me to say, no, yeah, our program is not sport specific, because a huge amount of what we deliver is best delivered through a sporting environment. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to look at a child's physical ability in that sport. And if our objective is to see success in all pupils, there is a huge percentage of pupils for whom particular sports are always going to not provide that platform. And so if we can offer a different way of seeing success in pupils and perhaps look for different types of success in pupils, then I think we're providing a much more rounded, holistic opportunity where Tommy might be fantastic at badminton, and it can show you all of these fantastic skills practically, but Sarah might not. And yet Sarah has a fantastic understanding of how to get the best out of what she's capable of, and so she can problem solve. You know, she knows that she's not going to get to this other part of the court. She's problem solved that, and so she's positioned herself differently. You know, there are all these things that potentially we lose in. How good is your forehand smash? How good is your free kick? How good are you at passing off of both hands in rugby? And perhaps what we don't look at is, for those people that struggle with that, where else are they being successful? And if we can find success in every pupil, then we are providing a program that's going to build self-confidence. And self-confidence was so high on this list that a huge amount of us believe that that's important. So let's build a PE program that really looks for that and really identifies that and rewards that.
I think just the last couple of minutes of listening to you answer there, you're clearly very passionate about what you're talking about, as three of us are around PE and sport. You talked about head, heart and hands and physical literacy, and PE being an exploration of that physical literacy. And you questioned and you used the language of, if our objective was to build self-confidence, is that where the problem is? That we don't really understand what our objective is in PE collectively, globally. We know that within maths, maths teacher's role is to give children the opportunity to develop their maths and their confidence within maths, and to do that through a series of different topics. You used a physics example, which you could apply the same to. And I'm sure that there are parities of PE where maybe it's a little bit more opaque, or it's a little bit more of a debate as to exactly what we're pinning down on. But is the problem that we're not clear? Is the problem that actually we don't know what our subject is, and we need to spend more time really honing down on what we need, or the phrase physical education to mean? Or do we just stick with the traditions of actually, well, we deliver sport, so let's just call it sport, and it's curriculum, and that's what it is. It's curriculum sport. You look at GCSEs. GCSE PE, you could argue, is GCSE sport with some sports science in there. Some of the A-level syllabuses are very, very similar in terms of, do they look at how you develop self-confidence in sport? Do they look at how you develop physical literacy? Or are they looking at sports science and the role of sport within the world, within schools? What needs to be the first question that we ask as a group of professionals? What's the first thing that we do to stay in our lane as PE teachers and say, well, this is what we're about. This is what we need to be doing.
It's really interesting, isn't it? And there is no one-line answer to this, because everybody has different opinions, and it really does ignite passions in people. And you only have to spend a bit of time on PE Twitter to see this. Like, it's so passionate, and you have people that are firmly entrenched in their with their standpoint on this. And there are some schools doing amazing work where they have completely stripped out anything that looks like sport from their PE programs, and that is one absolute extreme, isn't it? That's they've made up activities with no direct link to a traditional sport, and schools introducing gamification where the activities they're doing are based on computer games. They're not based on traditional sports anymore. I saw a school the other day doing Call of Duty with beanbags and hoops and all sorts of things, and it's a bit of a wild concept, but actually from their point of view, within their curriculum, it works. And I think context is really important, because what we're talking about, if you're talking about stripping out PE from sport, what you're doing in a funny kind of way is becoming actually much more traditional. If you think back to, or if you look at independent schools in the UK over the years, and there are some amazing examples of this happening really, really well. But they have games curriculums and PE curriculums. And all right, their PE curriculums may well still be focused around things like health-related fitness and fitness testing and terrible things that sort of make me squirm, like powerlifting or weightlifting, taking your year 8s into the gym and beasting them for an hour. And I'm sure all of those things still go on, but actually they have a PE curriculum that isn't based around teaching sport, and then they have a games curriculum that is. And actually that's sort of the direction that we've gone in. So we still have our games curriculum, and they will still have time when we teach them how to play touch rugby or cricket this term. But we have a PE curriculum. And our job as PE teachers is fundamentally to use that PE curriculum to look for a whole load of things that are physical, mental, and kind of social, collaborative, leadership, all these things. And that does not need to be done through PE, through sport. That can be done through any number of different ways, through any number of activities that may look like a sport. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, if the absolute best way for you to identify, let's say, collaboration is through playing a team sport, there's nothing wrong with that, is there? Now, does that team sport have to be a traditional sport? It doesn't have to be. It could be Call of Duty. But if you put the pupils into that type of environment and you know what you're looking for, then that's what your curriculum is. It's not the sports. It's
So we're going back to head, heart, and hands with different vehicles that explore physical literacy. So we're coming back really full circle to what you've mentioned earlier, and that really the vehicle of what you're choosing maybe doesn't necessarily matter quite as much than the content that you have in there and the objectives and the real things that you're trying to develop.
Yeah, so what we did, talking about our curriculum development, is we started with what we wanted to see. What were we looking for the pupils to show us? And from that, we then developed levels of success so that we could see success in every pupil. And we worked backwards from there. So we built our assessment program, we wrote our key indicators. We came up with 12 identifiers that's what we're going to look for. And then we decided that our curriculum, whatever it looks like, needs to provide opportunities for our pupils to show us these 12 things. And they're things like leadership skills. They're things like decision-making, creativity, coordination, fine motor skills, confidence, resilience. And then we just went looking for, well, what are the best activities for us to offer in order for us to be able to showcase those things, to see those things happening. And so some of the activities are what you would see as traditional games. And some of them are weird and wacky things that, we've literally come up with from scratch, but we know that is going to show us pupils doing this. And that's what we want to see, because then we can build a profile of each individual pupil against our key indicators and start to learn about them as a well-rounded individual. And we're going to get to the point. So the long-term end goal is we're going to build heat maps for each pupil in our school with these 12 points. And then the data will allow us to show the pupil and show their parents and show anybody else that needs to see it. What does that pupil look like? Yeah. And that's really powerful, because that allows us to then tailor their experience to suit them. So if they are a very traditionally sporty kid, and we have lots of those here, then they're going to shine in sports teams. They're going to shine when we do play sports. We're going to see that. And 3 out of our 12 key indicators are very obviously practical ability based. So we haven't scrapped that entirely. But what we want is we want to see what the pupils are good at if they do struggle with some of those practical skills. Now, but in the environment we're in, we have a lot of pupils that are not necessarily as fit as they could be. And you could argue that part of our responsibility is to move them towards a position where they are fitter, but that's a different conversation. We'd have to do a whole nother podcast on that. But if they're not supremely physical fit, they're going to struggle with certain aspects of a traditional PE curriculum. that does not mean that they can't be successful. It just means that we have to look for slightly different things in order to showcase that success. And that's what we're trying to do. And this whole process from the initial conversations through to the reaching out to other PE teachers, to the vast amounts of research that we've done on different pedagogy around PE, about what can we adopt from other curriculum areas that will support this. The kind of conversations that I have with people like yourselves has all led to this belief, and it is just a belief, and I'm quite happy to be proved wrong or be told that I'm wrong, and people do it all the time, and that's fine. But for our particular school at this particular time, we believe this is going to provide something much more than just what we were offering previously, which was, right, come on, we're all going to go out and play hockey today.
Yeah, I think if we just summarise that, Phil, it's context drives the narrative, doesn't it? Completely in all our situations, and there's no one model or approach that fits all. It might be that we'll never agree on what PE stands for across the world, and you know what? Is that a bad thing? That could be thrown out there. I think diversity is good in some ways, and if we look at it almost like one of them Dubai 10-lane highways where there's so much going on, and it's then just finding what the best is for you and your school and your country. And I bring that back to your experiences, Phil, where you've been a salesman, you've applied transferable skills from sales and done it effectively into teaching. Now, should we as teachers be providing an opportunity for kids to learn transferable skills, whatever you want to call them, human skills, essential skills, soft skills? Is that not the driving force of what we're trying to do, to help kids have these skills to go and do any job they want, just like you've just done?
Yeah, completely. No, it utterly is. It doesn't matter what you call them. So we have terms that we use. You will have terms that you use for these things. And what is it, coming back to the idea of leadership as well, your schools will have ideas about what these things are. You know, you have mission statements, you have vision statements, we have pillars of progress here. And it's all the same terminology. It's ingrained in what schools are these days, isn't it? It's this wider picture of what we have to provide to people. PE is so well placed today, and there's so many really well-trained PE teachers. You only have to look at senior leadership teams globally to see that PE teachers are how well respected we are as educators, because there's always a PE teacher on a senior leadership team.
I think the clarity of what you've got there, Phil, is really coming out in terms of exploring physical literacy with head, hands and heart. You're talking about your essential skills and the different transferable skills within there. But you've gone that step further and created a 12-point system where there's clarity on what the children are being, I want to say measured, I don't mean measured, I mean monitored and tracked and assessed on. I would imagine this is literally a measuring process every lesson, of course, but you've got 12 points there that are reference points for teachers to just be aware of in terms of these are the areas we're going towards, which I in turn imagine then helps you to drive towards that vision that you have for PE in your school. And it sounds really, really positive. It'll be really interesting to see how that journey goes. I know you're in the infancy of developing it. Is this something that the staff in your team are aware of now and that they're getting a little bit more confident with? Is it something that you're just starting this year?
Yeah, well, we're quite a way down we're actually currently running it as this term with a view to not ironing out any issues before next term. And issues always come around things like assessment and data and spreadsheets, and it's not about delivering. The delivery. Actually, what's quite interesting is the delivery mechanisms have not actually changed as much as I thought they might, and the approach that individual teachers take has not changed as much as I thought they might. And actually, the creativity in planning has not changed as much as I expected. But what has changed is what PE teachers are looking for and what they're identifying. And all of a sudden, we're having conversations about pupils that we potentially weren't having previously because we've spotted things, because now we're looking for them. It will be really interesting. I mean, it could be an absolute disaster, couldn't it? It feels, on bad days, when I'm looking at this giant spreadsheet with all of these key indicators for each year group, and it's absolutely enormous. And it has the potential to be a huge headache. But then lots of things in schools have the potential to be a huge headache. And it's about us, it's about people, leaders within schools, making sure it's not. And when you come back to that idea of servant leadership, I have a vision, my team have a vision, we've all bought into that vision. My responsibility is to make sure that that vision doesn't become a burden and that they are able to be outstanding. So we all know where we want to get to, we all know what we're going to have to do to get there. But I need to make sure that that doesn't become too onerous on them. And that's my leadership role within all of this. I'll have to come back in a year's time and tell you how it went and whether or not, it's about legacy. It's about legacy. And in all of the schools that I've worked in, I've always wanted to leave things, in my opinion, better than when I picked them up. And don't get me wrong, the work that Brighton College here have done up to this point has been outstanding, and a lot of credit needs to go to my predecessor, who I took over from 3 years ago, because a lot of this was there, and it's just needed to be adapted. But I want this to be something that sits within this school, within this community for the next 10 years. As this community develops and as the UAE develops, I want this to be something that lasts and in a positive way. And if that means that I need to drive it with my vision and kind of bring people along with it, then so be it. But I need to make sure that that doesn't happen to the detriment of people's well-being and all of those things that are equally as important in schools.
Yeah, I think that leads us really nicely into our quick-fire questions to finish, Phil.
Okay, go for it.
Give us your 3 top leaders that you'd love to go out and have a meal with. They can be dead or alive, but give us a little indication who you'd love to have that chat with.
Okay. So I would like to. I'd really love to have spent some time with Kurt Hahn.
Yeah.
I think he's very divisive, and there will be people that will watch this that think, no, absolutely not. No, that's his. He was, for all the wonderful things that he brought to education, he was not always the most upstanding human being, if I'm honest. But I think things like Round Square, things like UWC, some of the principles that have permeated into education subconsciously, I guess. I'd love to have been able to talk to him about his opinions on education today. Nelson Mandela. When you talk about servant leadership, that man gave his life for others. Gave his whole person was about serving other people, regardless of what that meant for him. And this the amazing story that he's got to tell. So I'd love to have met him. And then from a kind of, I was trying to think about a sporting person, and I think Martin Johnson. The way that he took, as much as Clive Woodward was a big part of it as well. Martin Johnson took that England rugby team, picked it up and carried it on his shoulders, and that ability to lead a group of huge personalities, I think that's exceptional. I'd love to know more about how he did that.
Brilliant. Lewis, to finish.
Yeah, last one, Phil. If you were to hire a billboard and you were able to write something on it for all passers-by to see, what would be written on your billboard?
Oh, that's a question. Okay, so there'd be 2 things, very educational based. Okay, so I'd want teachers to be reading my billboard. There are 2 things that leaders have said to me in the past that really will stay with me forever. The first one is wear the soles off your shoes. Don't sit behind a desk. Get out amongst the people. Get out with your team. Just be present. Be in the moment. Be in the present, and lead people. And the other one is somebody once said to me, "We're building houses, not brick walls." And I think the last 20 minutes conversation about transferable skills, holistic profiles, children are not brick walls. We don't just put a series of bricks together. No, they're houses. They have all sorts of different parts to them, and we need to identify all of those different parts. So yeah, we're building houses, not brick walls.
Top man, Phil. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate your time, and we wish you all the best for this project. Where can listeners read a little bit more about what you're doing and the work that you're completing at the moment?
So you can find me on LinkedIn at philmathe79. Same Twitter account. Yeah, come and debate. I enjoy a good debate on Twitter, and I promise I'll be positive. And if anybody, if anybody wants to see a bit more about it, just get in touch with me. You can drop me an email. You can find me via my LinkedIn account. Just come and have a chat.
Top man, Phil. Thanks a lot for your time, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.